Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by the Humanitarian Leadership Academy in partnership with Data Friendly Space. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you here to today's learning and discussion space where we'll be focusing on humanitarian AI, some of the top level insights from our recent Pulse survey together with our experts panel and you, our global community. We're absolutely delighted to welcome you here. We have 550 attendees registered from 90 different countries. So we really welcome you and thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. As you're joining us, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, letting us know your name and where you're joining us from. So it's great to see people already introducing themselves. Hello to Mohammed from Jordan, Saeed from Somalia, Zinette from Ethiopia, Jean from Senegal, Rana from Egypt, Albert from Montreal, welcome. So today's session is 90 minutes, which begins with this welcome, introductions and a little bit of housekeeping before we move into a bit of an audience poll as a bit of an icebreaker where we get to hear a bit about you. Then we'll move into top-level Pulse survey insights, and that will be a short presentation led by my colleagues, Madigan and Lucy. Then we'll move into a thematic panel discussion together with our wonderful panellists, and then our audience Q&A. So if you have any questions for the audience Q&A segment, please submit those using the Zoom Q&A function. So to find that, just go to your Zoom toolbar, bit of a mouthful, and press the question mark icon and submit your question there. And that's open at any time for you to submit. So this session is being recorded. The YouTube link and slide deck will be emailed to you. So expect to receive that in your inbox tomorrow. For accessibility, Zoom captions are enabled, including translations, and also post-event, a session transcript will be available. As you're already doing so, feel free to use the chat. We really want this to be a lively and interactive discussion space. So please use that as we go along. And also feel free to use the reactions. So if something resonates, feel free to use that so that we know what you're thinking and feeling. Just a reminder to submit questions using the Q&A feature as opposed to the chats, because the chat tends to move quickly and we may miss those. And just as a kind reminder, please keep any questions or comments that you have respectful and on topic, so relevant to humanitarian AI. And then in recognition of your learning and participation in this forum today, you'll be eligible to receive an HPAS digital badge. So please keep an eye out for a separate email that'll land in your inbox next week. So that's the housekeeping over with. I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by a brilliant global panel today and our research team. So I'm joined by Lucy Hall from the HLA, Madigan Johnson from Data Friendly Space, Rebecca Chandiru from Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, ESA Hub, Liz Devine from Goal Global, Timmy Olagunju from the Timeless Practice, and Najid Orozco Borges from Data Friendly Space. I'd now like to invite each speaker to just briefly introduce themselves to you, starting with Lucy.
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here with you all today. My name is Lucy. I'm the research and meal lead here at the Humanitarian Leadership Academy, and my research focuses primarily on digital capability, locally led technology, and looking at how we can make technology much more inclusive, ethical, safe, and locally led. Madigan, it'd be lovely to hand over to you now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madigan Johnson. I'm the head of communications at Data Friendly Space, where we build humanitarian AI tools. I'm going to pass it over to Rebecca to introduce herself now. Lovely to be here.
the volunteer engagement coordinator at Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team in the Eastern Southern African Hub. I have about 7 years of experience in geospatial data, very passionate about building capacity of young people and the community in open mapping. Just briefly about our involvement in tech at Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, we've developed an AI-assisted mapping service called FAIR, used by so many communities all over the world to increase speed and capacity and efficiency of creating base maps. Local users are able to train the Geo AI computer vision models to create maps by selecting a specific Geo AI model, imagery, and then the features like buildings, roads, etc. And this tool also allows for human mappers to validate the predicted features. So yeah, happy to be here. Thank you so much. Over to you, Liz.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Devine, and I'm the head of the program technical team at Goal Global. It's an international NGO working across both fragile and crisis-affected contexts in Africa, the Middle East, and Latin America. I've been working in the sector for over a decade, and for the last year and a half, I've been overseeing our team of humanitarian experts, working across health, nutrition, food security, livelihoods, and a range of other sectors. We've been focusing for the last year and a half on the intersection of program quality and technology, and trying to find how we can integrate AI safely in our programming and amplify the impact of our work throughout across the globe. I'm really happy to be here today. Now I'll hand it over to Timmy. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Elise. I'm Timmy Olagunju. I based in Lagos, Nigeria, and I help organizations and governments shape policy, regulations, and governance efforts, particularly in emerging technology. For over a decade and a half, I'm currently a Makoto Fellow on Technology in the Public Interest, and it's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Najid Roscoe, and happy to be here with you all today. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Data Friendly Space. I'm based in Bogota, in Colombia, and for the past 15 years, I've been developing products, tech products. As Marigan mentioned, at DFS, we build tech products for the humanitarian sector and provide also analysis for crisis response. We have worked in the past with IFRC, with UN agencies, with Give Directly, and we were the ones behind the development of the DEEP. Maybe some of you were users of the tool. And today we have a tool that is called candid. It uses AI just to bring qualitative, quantitative data and supports analysis for thousands of users across more than 90 countries. So yeah, happy to be here with you today and looking forward to the conversation and of course to your questions as well. Thank you. Back to you, Kamal.
Thank you so much, Najid, and thank you so much to our wonderful panelists. I know I'm biased, but we do really have an excellent group here today, and as well as our wonderful community. So I'm so excited that we have over 200 attendees in the virtual room with us already from all over the world. So we're really looking forward to the conversation that will unfold. So thank you for being here. So as I mentioned, this session is being hosted as follow-up to our Humanitarian AI Pulse survey that we conducted last month, where you told us, our community, how you're using AI in 2026. So this session has an intentional community focus. So we want this to have a community of practice type feel to it. So we really want to send to you and your experiences. So as I say, you're very much encouraged to use the chat as we go along. So thank you to everyone who took part in the survey. We had over 1,700 responses from 120 different countries and territories. And this builds on the global baseline study that we conducted in May, June 2025, where we received over 2,500 responses from 144 different countries. So we really do have this invaluable data set, and all of your experiences and opinions and views, which creates this rich picture and is invaluable for the sector to really get a handle on where we are at with AI across the humanitarian space. So thank you again. It can't really be overstated how grateful we are for trusting us with your views and responding to the survey. So today, what we're not intending to do is give a really deep dive technical exploration of the research itself. We're going to give a top level thematic insights, which will then be used as a basis for the discussion together with our panel and you. And then in the coming weeks, we'll be releasing an updated data dashboard where you'll be able to delve into the data yourself directly, so you can see all of that and hone in on the areas of interest to you. And we're going to be releasing an executive summary as well, so you can read that at your leisure. So before we dive into that, and as I say, we want this to be quite community focused, some of the feedback from our previous sessions is that people wanted it to be more interactive. So we've got a bit of an icebreaker to hear more from you. So I've got a few quick questions that we want to ask you. We invite you to participate. It's obviously totally optional, but it'd be great to hear your thoughts. I'm going to launch the questions and Madigan will walk you through those.
Yeah, so the first question is, what first comes to mind when you think about AI and humanitarian work? So we have some points about, the risk and ethical dilemmas, new ways to work smarter and faster, exciting possibilities for innovation, or maybe you're still figuring it out.
Fantastic. I can see the answers coming in thick and fast. We have 100 responses already. So I'll just give it a few moments. The pace is slowing now. So I'll close the poll it's still shooting up again. Everyone's keen. I'm just going to end the poll now. It's just a quick snapshot.
Okay, so it looks like is that new ways to work smarter and faster is probably the most popular. Then going to the risk and ethical dilemmas and exciting possibilities for innovation coming after that. Only a couple of people still not sure, figuring it out. So good insights.
I think that's really interesting to see that risks and ethical dilemmas rank second there. Is that right? Okay. I will launch the second poll.
So for you, where are you now with AI? So as a non-user, you don't use AI. If you're still exploring in the learning phase, if you're a regular user of AI, or if you rely on AI for a significant part of your work. This is something that I think we've asked in our original surveys. So would love to know from our community where you kind of sit with the research we're gonna talk about soon.
Just give it a few more moments. Again, I can see the responses coming in thick and fast. Just give it a few more seconds. Okay.
All right, so a lot of you are saying a regular user of AI, and then exploring and learning and relying on AI for a significant part of your work is actually pretty close, only a two-point difference there. We have a couple non-users, so again, we would also love to hear from you as well, because that it was also a significant part of our research and survey. And then our final question to you is what is your main objective from joining this session? Is it to gain a general overview of what's happening across the sector, to support personal learning and development, to learn something new that you can share with your work or colleagues or within your organization, or to connect and interact with others in this space?
Okay, I'm going to end the poll now. Thank you very much for casting your votes.
All right, so it looks like the majority of you are here to gain a general overview, and then also learning something new to support, I think, within your colleagues or organization. So again, very interesting here. So thank you so much for participating in the poll, and it's hopefully will allow you guys as well to connect with each other.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's really interesting to see where people are at with AI today. And some of the themes that we touched on in those questions will emerge in the presentation from the survey as well. So without further ado, I'll pass you back to Madigan, who will kick off the insights.
Hi, everyone. Again, thank you so much for being here today. So we started this pulse survey as a follow-up to our 2025 survey that we did last May and June. And what we had deemed back then the humanitarian AI paradox has now shifted into this sector in transition. So what we're seeing is that AI is no longer just an experiment, and that adoption is becoming more widespread across roles, organizations, and different geographies. The level of use has increased significantly since 2025, and there's a very clear indication that AI is here to stay as a core tool in humanitarian work. So I want to start with a stat that I think really kind of sets the scene. So half of the respondents in our 2026 Pulse survey are now using AI daily, so 50.4%. That's up from the 45% just a year ago. So we've had an increase of 14.2%. I want that to kind of sink in for a moment, because this is from people spanning over 120 different countries, working in local nonprofits, INGOs, UN agencies, government, academia. And I think the quote on this slide from a local NGO respondent in sub-Saharan Africa really captures something that the numbers alone can't. And so it's a technology that has come to stay, and organizations that shy away from it will be left behind. And that's not us saying as DFS or as the HLA. That's a practitioner in their context telling us what AI feels like from where they sit. So while we go through today's session, I want to we'll kind of focus on the widespread individual use is not the same as institutional or sector integration. And the gap between those two things, between what people are doing on their own and what organizations are actually supporting and governing, is kind of where the real truth lives. If you can go to the next slide, Kamal. So one of the things, though, that I'm really excited to share today is what happens when we look specifically at respondents who took both the 2025 survey and this 2026 Pulse survey. We had about 12% of this year's sample participate in both. And what we saw was that there's this leading cohort that is really quite rapidly advanced in terms of adoption, governance, and training. And so when you track that cohort, this picture of AI adoption shifts quite dramatically. So what we saw is that daily usage jumped from 44.5% to 58.7% in 1 year in the same group of people. So that's not a new population of people coming in. That's the same practitioners just using AI more. What is also really interesting and stands out is the governance data. So we had formal AI policy presence in this cohort went from 21.8% to 35.7%. And when you add in organizations that are currently actively developing a policy, that combined figure actually goes up to 54%. And that's a nearly 18 percentage point shift. Also with organizations is that the AI training almost doubled, showing that organizations are also investing into this staff. And so some of the kind of key takeaways from here is that this cohort kind of shows us that organizations that are engaged and stay engaged early on, they're integrating and adopting AI responsibly, and they're moving this along together. So with more usage, there becomes more governance and more training. And really, this is sort of the trajectory that we want to see sector-wide. I do have to just make a note of a limitation here, because that is important. This is a self-selected group. And so the respondents that are willing to come back and respond are likely more to be motivated and more AI engaged. But I think it's possible. They show us what's possible when organizations commit. And I think that matters enormously for what comes next. I'm now going to pass it over to Lucy to share kind of what the key themes that emerged from the 2026 survey are this year.
Again, and it's been so interesting looking at all of your responses. there is so many themes that were coming out, and it just really was a wealth of information. So just first of all, a huge thank you to contributing to such a rich knowledge base. And there are so many themes that we could have talked about today, but we felt that these were the really important themes to come out from our analysis. And they are, the first one being, locally embedded AI capacity is really widely distributed across the humanitarian system. Second one is sector-wide AI integration. There is widespread individual use and uneven institutionalization. Even though that's increasing, it is slightly still uneven. The third theme is adoption is being driven by yourselves, practitioners. It's not being driven by top-down organizations imposing this technology on us as humanitarians. Fourth point is regional adoption is shifting, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that one from Madigan. And the fifth theme that we're seeing is that moving humanitarian AI is kind of shifting from individual practice to sector transformation. We're at a tipping point, and I'm really looking forward to exploring that one theme with you. So, look at our first theme in much more detail. What we are really seeing here is that AI adoption isn't limited to large international organizations or technical teams. It is consistently emerging throughout the humanitarian system, regardless of what operational role you're in, whether you're in a thematic role, a technical role. And this is really consistent, particularly among local organizations and practitioners working directly in operational context. And I think that comes back to that point from the poll. 43% of us here today are saying that we're looking at working smarter and faster. And I think that data really shows that. What we're actually seeing is that local NGOs do report slightly higher daily usage of AI than international NGOs. And in particular, in resource-constrained contexts, again, working smarter, faster, and innovating where resources may no longer be available because of the changes within the sector. That's our hypothesis anyway. So this really does tell us that AI isn't only emerging through top-down institutional investment. Like I say, that was our assumption coming into this pulse survey. We've seen over the past few months that INGOs in particular have been investing heavily in AI infrastructure, particularly in agentic AI over the last few months. But what we're really seeing is that AI adoption is being driven by local humanitarian practitioners just using tools to support their work on a daily basis. Over to you, Madigan.
Yeah, so the next point is this sector-wide integration of, and again, kind of following up with Lucy said about this widespread individual usage, but how it kind of becomes uneven when starting to look at the institutionalization within the humanitarian sector. And this is one that I keep coming back to because I think it clearly captures this sort of central tension that's occurring right now. So AI is used by 50.4% of individuals daily. That's the majority threshold, and it's been crossed for the first time in 2026. That's huge. And yet only 8.8% of respondents work in organizations where AI is widely adopted and integrated. Not 88%, but 8.8%. And that gap between widely adopted and daily usage, that 41.6 percentage points, is a really defining kind of quantitative point. And so what's sort of underneath that number matters too. And so what we're calling in adoption is, a lot of these people are still in the experimentation stage. And what people are experimenting with is largely productivity oriented. So they're using AI to write faster. They're using it to do a quicker research synthesis, summarizing meetings and notes. And that has real value in a sector where we've seen a lot of, shifts in the last year. But it's also qualitatively different from operational integration, where AI is actually embedded into the program design, into needs assessments or resource allocation and decision support making processes. The other thing that when we look at this is we look at governance, and 44.7% confirmed their organization has no AI policy at all. A further 13.8% did not know if one exists. And so together, that 58.5% are operating without a confirmed governance infrastructure. And this is in a sector that, handles sensitive population data. In terms of training, 34% have access to organization-led AI training, which is a third, which, shows that there's movement, but 54% are still relying on self-directed learning. And so that 20-point gap is not primarily a resource problem. It's sort of a prioritization problem, especially when you consider how many people are using it on a daily basis. So it means that the sector is generating these AI capabilities through individual initiative rather than the sort of systematic investment. And that can produce uneven distribution and consistent practice and capability that may be invisible to institutional risk management. I'm going to let Lucy go into where the practitioner-driven approach is.
This is one of the clearest patterns in the data, is that adoption really is being driven by practitioners rather than through formal organizational rollout. So whilst so many of us now use AI daily, only around a third report receiving organizational training. Whilst that has grown significantly since last year, as Madigan highlighted at the start of this presentation, what this is really telling us is that practitioners aren't waiting for organizations and institutions to introduce these tools. We're going out and problem solving ourselves because they provide immediate value to us. It primarily happens through hands-on experimentation, through peer learning. And as practitioners are becoming more familiar with these tools, we are starting to see a shift in the type of work that is being delivered using AI as well, towards much more analytical and decision support use cases. Primarily, and certainly last year, we were looking at much more content generation, editing, and refining of emails. That's still very much the case, but we are seeing that shift into slightly more advanced use cases as our confidence and comfort with the tools grows. And this really does represent a workforce level transformation where capabilities emerging from the ground up rather than being introduced solely through top-down institutional systems. Madigan.
Thank you. So regional adoption is shifting, and there's no way about it. Before I walk through this, I just want to note two things. So first, what we mean by AI adoption is this combines respondents who reported that their organizations are either experimenting in limited implementation or widely adopted. And we did quite a broad measure because we wanted to kind of capture where the movement is happening across the whole spectrum. The second thing to note is that it's in certain regions such as Western Europe, Eastern Europe, North America, the sample sizes were a bit too small to include here meaningfully. You will be able to explore that in the dashboard, though. So with those noted, Asia Pacific is the headline. Asia Pacific has a 12.7 percentage point increase in a single year, from 45.6% to 58.4%. And that's the fastest regional growth we've seen in this data set. Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean also show meaningful movement. And while global and multi-region organizations lead in terms of absolute value. But I think the number that kind of matters the most here and is consistent, and I've already said this before, across every single region, is that widely adopted and integrated, which means really truly embedding AI into organizations, still sits below 10% in every single region without exception. Interestingly, though, in MENA and Sub-Saharan Africa, around a quarter of respondents have reported that they're intending to adopt AI, but haven't yet started. So there's these large populations that are sitting right at the threshold of adoption, and we would love to hear from you if you're from those regions about maybe why you haven't, or why your organization hasn't kind of made the plunge into experimenting with AI. And so that's just something that we definitely want to follow up in further research. Another part is in terms of governance. Every single region uses AI more than it governs it. Roughly half of Sub-Saharan Africa respondents have no AI policy, and it's very similar in the MENA and Latin American Caribbean regions as well. But what does AI policy or risk mitigation kind of look like when the technology changes so rapidly? So we're really kind of hoping to hear from you as an audience, and then also maybe from our panelists as well. I'm going to shift it back to you, Lucy, for final wrap up.
And again, I think what all of these stats, this information and the stories that are really coming out from our analysis is that we're at a real transition point. AI isn't something that we're experimenting, that we're debating as a sector. We are using it. It is embedded in our workflows. And this poses so many questions that we would love to explore in more depth. But I think what's really obvious is that this isn't about curiosity or hype anymore. There are clear, real, tangible values in day-to-day humanitarian work. And what's really especially interesting is that this confidence is emerging across the sector, including among local organisations who really report strong belief in AI's decision-making value. And that really does reinforce the narrative that we've been talking about today. Capability is emerging from the ground up, driven by humanitarian practitioners. To us, this has posed a really important structural question, because as this transformation is being carried by us as individuals and practitioners, it really creates risk and opportunity, because we are largely doing that without the institutional support. There's huge opportunity because we are able to work, as we spoke about in the poll, smarter and faster. We're able to innovate. But the risks are there because the responsibility for safe, effective, ethical use of AI is being placed on us as individuals rather than organisations and institutions. So we believe that the question for the sector as a whole now is not whether AI adoption will continue. I think that's quite clear from the changes that we've seen from last summer to now. The question is now becoming whether organisations are going to step forward to support and scale this capability in a responsible manner. And whether that's we move from an individual adoption to a truly systemic adoption with the governance, training and infrastructure needed to sustain it, that's the decision point that we're coming to, we feel. Because it feels like we're at a bit of a tipping point, and it's not just about adoption anymore. It's about whether we have the institutional capability to support and enable this growing locally led humanitarian AI workforce. And I think that's a really interesting point to pause on from this research.
Thank you so much, Lucy and Madigan, for walking us through those top-level insights. Honestly, we had a real dilemma as to how much we could share with you today. So that was just designed to just act as like a provocation for today's discussion. And we do plan to, as I say, release an executive summary, the dashboard, and I'm sure we'll have more webinars and podcasts to delve into this further. So watch this space. So it was so interesting for us to work through this because all of these data points represent real people's lives, situations, adaptation, resilience in the face and scale of all these sectoral changes that have happened through 2025 through till now across the sector, technological, funding and so on. And that really did emerge. So I want to turn to the panel now to get some reflections, just initial reactions to some of the things that have just been shared. So this is going to be quite rapid. So firstly, can I come to you, Timmy, wearing your governance hat, so to speak? What's your take? What jumps out at you?
Okay, so three key things jumps out to me. First is the fact that the humanitarian sector deals with the most vulnerable in society, and humanitarian AI, basically is more the moral compass or core of what AI should be doing, which is for public good, which is for the most vulnerable, which is for human good, And so it's important that humanitarian AI and humanitarian organizations lead the effort in governance. And I will state this which brings me to my second quick point, which is the fact that AI policy is at a slow pace compared to the growth in the use of AI within the humanitarian sector is a bit concerning, because the fact is that as it stands, it takes governance framework to provide the context for which AI can really serve the public good. For example, when you look at humanitarian work, the context of language, most of this AI are developed by countries or nations that are farther away from where they are deployed in terms of, humanitarian work and the like. So firstly, in terms of language, in terms of consent, and also in terms of options for the beneficiaries of the humanitarian work to be able to opt out of AI. So basically, it's important to, discuss this context around governance. And then the third last point is the fact that, there was a mention of practitioners driving it rather than a top-down approach. And that brings to mind two things. First is the good part of it, which is that it shows that the technology AI is becoming embedded and utilized. And that's one of the key successes of technology, the fact that it is embedded and utilized and it is driven by natural use, not by, some artificial instance. And then the second part, which is the last point, which is the negative part also, is that particular data speaks to the absence of digital leadership. Thank you.
Really pertinent points. Thank you so much, Timmy. I'll come to you next, Liz. So what jumps out at you when you compare that to what you're seeing through your work at Goal Global?
Thanks very much. Yes, I think one of the biggest things that really stuck out to me was that, that dramatic increase in people using AI daily. It really has become, no longer an experiment. It's business as usual, really. But it's that sticking point that, that Timmy was referring to. There's only 8.8% widespread integration. And I think that's really linked to that, limited governance framework that we have, on digital leadership and humanitarian context. So people are using the AI for their own efficiencies, not for design, monitoring, evaluation, or other, or other areas. And I think overall that's really reflective of a limited risk appetite to drive forward with widespread integration as it's evolving really, that quickly. One of the things that we're doing at Goal is to really try to address that is, we want to facilitate that shift for using AI for personal use to more organizational development. And we're actually working with Data Friendly Space and Najid is on the panel, to try to develop tools that we can use, to synthesize information and best practices so that, we can recommend, the strongest and most relevant packages of interventions. I think that's where we're going to start seeing a really exciting shift, using AI, to embed AI into our decision-making and programming, and eventually be able to use that, to transition our work over to local partners and really make sure that we have locally driven programming instead of delivering a top-down approach.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much, Liz. And thanks for sharing your experience about exploring contextualized tools. So Rebecca, can we come to you? What are your reactions to what we've just heard? And how does that align or differ from what you're seeing with your work with HOT?
Yeah, so basically what my eyes were very critical on is how locally embedded AI capacity is, and then how the NGOs are getting more confidence in AI. I would say NGOs are usually solving local problems. So what does this mean? It means that the tools should be designed to solve local problems like disasters, public health, etc. And then meaning that we should involve the community in verifying this AI, and the communities, since the communities are the ones facing these problems, they should be part of this AI. And like Tim mentioned, most of these policies of AI are made by people that are not in sub-Saharan Africa and LATAM. This means, and you've seen the growth growing very quickly. This implies that Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America should be involved in making these policies. They should be involved in building these AI models. They should even be involved in using these models. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. And that really does echo a lot of the open comments that came through, particularly from our respondents in the Global South and those from local organisations. So thank you, Rebecca, for sharing your perspective on that. So let's come to you, Najid. How's this looking from your perspective? It's great to hear about the work that you're doing with Liz at Goal Global. Where do you think that the sector can safely take AI in 2026? How far do you think we can safely and responsibly push this innovation? Sorry, I know that's a very big question in this short time, but I'd love to hear your take.
Yeah, thanks, Kaman. Yeah, I think right now, and let me start probably with what we are seeing today to see what probably the 2026 look like. So what we see today is that AI is helping people to deal with information overload and also understand what's actually happening in a crisis. And let me also make a disclaimer here. AI, now the hype is kind of generative AI, but AI is also traditional, let's say machine learning algorithms, but also satellite imageries, and so on. So just to say that what we are seeing is an adoption in analysis practices, and as DFS, we are supporting many partners with that work. With candid, basically, we have reduced the amount of time that it takes to go from raw data or raw information to useful analysis from about 2 weeks to just a couple of hours in places like Sudan, Lebanon, Myanmar, OPT as well. And what I think it's really encouraging is that partners, like Cole, Save the Children, Give Directly, those users are start kind of feeling the difference, and people are saying, okay, AI is improving how efficiently they work, and this is not for replacing humans, and the judgment of humans is just expanding their capabilities. So to answer your question, how I see kind of 2026 coming, first, I think scale is important. We need to move from small pilots and make AI a normal kind of practice and something that is embedded. We have seen kind of the challenges for governance, but I think it's a discussion that we need to have. And it's not about just only working faster, but again, expanding kind of what the teams are able to do. Deeper analysis, forecasting, and making sense of complex situations. The second, I think, is integration. AI needs to fit into the existing workflows. If you create extra systems or a parallel process, it's difficult for users. So every new tool comes with a new learning curve, and you need to make sure that that transition is as smooth as possible. So integration is really key. And I think the third point for this year is, of course, localization. We know this word kind of, it's in humanitarian kind of a conversation always, but here I think, and from the results of the survey, we see that this kind of bottom-up approach where users in the field are the ones kind of testing it. So the data shows kind of AI capabilities in just sitting in large institutions, but it's spread across the whole system. And supporting local NGOs, testing and building with them, it's what I think truly will drive the change. So the scaling, integrating, and localization, I think that's what we can expect and how we may need to look at 2026.
Thank you so much. That's really, really thought-provoking. As Lucy has mentioned and others, that we're at this tipping point, but we're all talking here about building, but safely and in collaboration and partnership with equitably. How we do that, that's obviously a whole conversation that has to be ongoing, but thank you so much for sharing your initial thoughts on that. I'll now like to hand over to Lucy, who'll continue facilitating this conversation.
Everyone, really looking forward to asking some quite tricky questions to you all. Hopefully not too tricky. This is an open question to our panel. And I think what I would love to hear some quick thoughts on is actually what is needed to therefore accelerate. We talked about making it faster, expanding use cases, fitting it into existing workflows, policies being more locally led. What is needed to drive that? Big question.
I think I can start and give probably two thoughts that come to my mind. I think the first one is sustained funding. I think donors, they love pilots, kind of grants and kind of testing and 6 months, 12 months, projects, funding. But scaling a tool, not only AI, but tech tool or projects from 10 to 1,000 users requires capital, engineering, maintenance, and iteration, feedback collection, and so on. So I think sustained funding is one thing. And the second would be co-creation from day one. So not just consultation at the end of the development cycle, but just genuinely kind of co-design with local organizations just right from the beginning. Understanding the problems, I always believe about thinking big, but starting small. So you can just start tackling small problems that you have. And I think collaborating with those that are on the field and can test very easily and iterate based on the feedback they provide you.
Maybe if I can just come in there, to complement that, Najid. Yeah, one of the things that I think is really important as we're developing different kinds of tech tools is that, we really have to integrate, contextual and community knowledge. That has to be treated as the kind of the source data. There's been a few comments in the chat about, questioning the use of large language models in the types of AI tools that we're using. And I think, AI trained on the global north data sets are always going to underperform in our context. It's just not going to be as relevant as those that are trained locally. So I think integrating that local knowledge and using, whether it's, smaller local language models, that's what's going to make the AI tools that we develop the most accurate and trusted by the communities that we're working in.
I'll come in there also. So for me, on my sake, is mainly concentrating on the AI tools. I believe AI tools should be designed on community locally identified problems, and they should serve the people. This also means that the people should be involved in actually testing the AI and using those models. An example I would give is the FAIR tool that we have at HOT. The tool has been developed. It's an AI-assisted mapping service, and it has geo AI models. And those geo AI models are open, and different community members are able to use that AI to develop locally mapping models. And then in the end, they are able to provide feedback, and that feedback is incorporated into the tool, and the tool is involved. So at the end of the day, once the local community is involved in the building of the models, is involved in the testing of the models, they become very confident and they trust the data. So I believe involving the community and actually the people that are actually going through those challenges is very important. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, to chime in here, Lucy. So good points have been raised. I just wanted to reiterate that Najid mentioned something around funding. I just want to state that firstly is that fund is fundamental to fund any mental thing. And that effort towards funding is key. Also, in line with what the other brilliant panelists have stated, there's a key need for digital leadership at the humanitarian sector level. Digital leadership both locally and also in terms of government, because culture, not politics, can determine the success of this thing we're talking about. But politics can change the culture and deliver it from itself. So it has to be local leadership within the humanitarian sector as well as governments. And then lastly, this thing that we do a lot around AI literacy foundation, which basically is focusing on universities. Higher institutions are very key. That's where you have a lot of research and researchers and a lot of young minds that can innovate. It's important that the humanitarian sector begins to work closely with universities, within the context of this local regions. There's a need for the town and the gown to come together, in holy matrimony in order to drive digital leadership and humanitarian AI that really serves the people. Yeah, thank you.
I love that. And I think that's something that we at the Humanitarian Leadership Academy in particular believe really strongly about, is bringing people together, looking at sustainable solutions that's not fragmented and that draws on data and volunteers embedded in communities. So that's wonderful to hear that message loud and clear from all four of you. I now have another potentially slightly controversial question that I want to pose, because we've talked about governance and policy to make sure that AI is safe and responsibly used. What was really clear from the narratives that came out from the research is that adoption and usage has been driven from the ground up. It's not been imposed. And there is a sense that people really trust AI tools. Not fully. I don't think anyone would probably say they trust AI fully for various reasons. But what I have been wondering is if, as organizations bring in more restrictions, bring in those governors, bring in policies, bring in trainings that make people question or doubt AI a little more potentially, would this actually affect AI usage? Do you think that people may stop using these tools or change how we use it potentially? And that's a really tricky question to speculate. So I'd really welcome just ideas from anyone that's willing to take that question on.
Okay, so let me just chime in quickly. Firstly, is the fact that for me, as someone who works in emerging tech policy, governance, and regulation, I come to understand that these things are tools. They are like money. Money itself is not evil. It's the application of it that now matters. Because when you talk about policy and governance, you're basically those are tools that can be used. We've seen where procurement policies, for example, in Singapore, has been used as a way to drive AI training and literacy, where tax credit is given to people above a certain age to be able to access tax credit and subsidies in order to advance their learning in AI. That has happened in Singapore. But then we've also seen the US, where you have certain policy frameworks that, kind of drew back on regulations that seek to debar AI from kind of moving forward or things of that nature. So basically what happens is it is not that governance or policy itself is bad. It is that it is a tool and can be used. And I quickly just want to liken it quickly so that my other panelists can chime in to the situation where you have a family. And in that family, right, you have certain unwritten codes or rules on how you engage. And then you decide to help a neighbor who is traveling by bringing the neighbor into the family, right? Now, when you bring the neighbor's child into the family, the challenge there is that the neighbor's child is new to the family. And so you need to set certain parameters or policy that the neighbor's child over time, the neighbor's child can have like a week of, just, jamboree. But afterwards, strict rules start to set in. And what you're trying to do is that you're trying to ensure that you manage the outcomes that you get in the household in a way that it is beneficial to everyone. And so that's what governance practically can do in that context, in terms of people introducing foreign AI tools into local humanitarian contexts.
Yeah, thanks, Simi. Yeah, I think it's about probably towards confidence and trust. Confidence in the way that organizations, back to the survey, when people say the organization either doesn't have an AI policy or they are not even sure if one exists, two things need to happen or tend to happen. Either people avoid AI completely because they are not sure, or they use it kind of quietly without much guidance. So basically, in those organizations, big organizations, there are users that, their bosses, they don't know, but they are probably paying from their own pockets GPT Pro, and they are kind of using it on a daily basis. So neither of those kind of scenarios is ideal. So clear policies kind of they don't stop innovation. They give people the confidence to start using AI in a responsible and openly way. And the second, I think in regards of trust, it always goes back to, okay, how you are using the AI and for which tasks. So let's say you can use AI models, but you have a kind of a clear pathway of how you are judging or evaluating the outputs, always having the human in the loop process, reviewing, verifying the outputs. Of course, you can start trusting it more and more in regards of those tasks that probably don't harm directly beneficiaries or communities, but allows you to be more efficient in analyzing, summarizing information, or so on, just to give an example. So yeah, I think those are kind of the two points I want to mention. Thanks.
Awesome. What I'm going to say is very close to what Najid is saying. So for me, I believe if your organization accepts to use AI, there should be transparency and limitations on how you should use AI. Let's say your organization has accepted to use AI. It should be involved in your workflow. I will give an example of where I work from. At Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, we have an end-to-end workflow, which involves imagery acquisition. It could be drone, it could be satellite imagery, then the actual digitization, which is remote mapping. So the other one that has been added is the AI-assisted mapping. So the AI-assisted mapping is added to the workflow just in case it's required. And then after the AI-assisted mapping, that's when we go into field data collection and then downloading the map and then the map use. So what I can say is to make AI use as transparent as possible, and then include it in the workflows. Yeah, so that everyone is clear on how to use AI and what are the limitations. Yeah, thank you.
And maybe just to echo what the other panelists have said, I think ultimately when it comes to governance, the risk of undergoverning is far greater than the risk of overgoverning. And I think we really need to move away from the idea that governance introduces restrictions. Instead, it introduces protections, both for us and for the participants in the programming that that we're working towards delivering. As I think both Najid and Rebecca have mentioned, is that people are using it anyways, and they might not be using it in the most responsible way, not out of any kind of malice, but because they just might need the guardrails and some guidance on how to use it, where it's appropriate to use AI, and where it's better off to do things, the old-fashioned way. And I think that we really need to step up and make sure that we work to support the development of stronger governance structures. I think ultimately that is going to allow both ourselves and the communities that we're working in to trust the way that we're using AI far more. Knowing that we have these kind of protection measures in place and what they're ultimately designed to do. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I would love to really delve into all of these points more, but I am conscious of time. So Kamal, I'm going to hand back to you because I think it's now time to hear from our audience.
What a fascinating discussion that's unfolded already. We'll have to continue the conversation in other forums, but in the next segment, we're moving to audience Q&A, and that's where we'll be putting some of the community questions to you. So with the time that we have, we will maybe have time for about 5 or 6 questions. So I'm sorry if we don't get to address your question directly today, but we will roll them forward and we'll find ways to share responses and ideas with you. So for the first question, I'd like to come to Timmy, if that's okay, because of Timmy's background in governance. So there's a question that has been received from Neil Dillon. And the question is, thanks for the research and presentation. It's been really valuable. You've shown that AI uptake is still quite sporadic and often driven by individual initiative with only limited work on governance so far. So yes, that does align with what we've shared. In that context, Neil says, I'm curious how you see safe use evolving as adoption scales, especially in systems handling highly sensitive protection data, including GBV related and wider protection risks. So there's other parts to the question, but I'll just come to you first, Timmy, to see if you've got any take on that.
Well, I think that safe use will definitely evolve, maybe not at the pace that the adoption is. And that's why this kind of conversations are quite important with stakeholders, so that we can see the light as to why it is important to realize that indeed, people are actually using it for their own personal work, and their personal work can actually dovetail into the collective outcome. And so pushing this conversation enriches the understanding, so pushing this kind of conversations that we're having now is one way to see that there's a consistent or close to consistent evolution of safe use as regards the use of AI in the humanitarian sector, particularly those key areas that have been mentioned, as well as also areas that involve displacement or, insecurity, displacement as a result of insecurity and things of those kind of sensitive nature data. But what we've seen, for example, is that even at the level of, even simple privacy policy, because that's where it starts. It's not just about putting a tag and a name and saying, this is our AI policy. No, AI policy is beyond just a sheet of paper, or some set of rules. It also speaks to other key issues. For example, privacy policy. We've also seen that, for example, as simple as privacy policy is a challenge for many organizations because people have not come to the realization that these things are quite important, particularly for the humanitarian sector, which deals with the most vulnerable in society in that context. And so I think this kind of conversations will push the envelope forward, but albeit at a very slow pace still.
Thank you, Timmy. Yes, there's a lot of work to be done there, and really appreciate your candid insights there. Liz, I just wanted to bring you in because I know that you have direct experience working in the humanitarian sector. So I wondered if you had anything to add to this, especially around the highly sensitive protection data and wider protection risks.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And just kind of to echo a couple of the points that Timmy was making about some of the challenges as it relates to both privacy, there's data protection policies that we have to consider. And one of the challenges that I know that we've experienced is that there are different levels of regulation in some of the countries that we're operating in compared to some of the countries where maybe headquarters are. So there's always a balance between trying to make sure that we are observing maybe the most stringent protections as we're developing different kinds of AI solutions. But one of the things that I think is really important that we need to kind of figure out as a sector is that we need to develop a set of minimum standards for really sensitive areas like protection, like gender-based violence. These aren't the only ones that we need to be considering, but we need to have a set of core minimum standards that we agree on amongst all the organizations, so that we know that at the bare minimum that we can provide these quality assurances in our programming and make sure that we're using AI safely. I don't think that we've reached that point yet. I think it's still, early on in the maybe policy development, phase or the governance structures. But I think that we do need to be paying attention to that quickly, because ultimately we are operating in very sensitive environments, and we want to make sure that the programmings that we're delivering do no harm to the participants. And so I think this kind of conversation is happening at individual project level, but we need to be bringing that much more wider throughout the community.
That's really interesting. Thank you, Liz. It's interesting that you talked about humanitarian minimum standards in the way that, Sphere, CHS, and so on. And I know that's something that we talk about, like conversations. I don't know how much actual movement there is. Obviously, the whole sector is being hamstrung, so to speak, in many ways due to, obviously the deep funding cuts and staffing and so on. So I don't know how much tangible movement is possible in 2026, or how much is aspiration in a much longer term direction of travel.
If I could just jump right back in there, come on. I think that's actually one of the reasons that we're seeing slower organizational adoption, right? Because organizations are grappling with this level of risk. And we don't want to put, these kind of solutions out there and not be able to back them up with the ethical safeguards that we need to happen. So that we need to have. So that's why I think that, we see that, 8 or 9%, organizational integration. I think it's because, we're navigating that risk appetite to make sure that, we are, providing, tools that are safe to use and that can, manage the sensitivity of the information that might be channeled through these tools.
Absolutely. And that really resonates with what we saw in the open comments. Even people who are really, really tech positive evangelists, they're still very mindful of the risks, and they are looking, because humanitarians are trained to work to standards and they know that they're, working with vulnerable communities. This is of utmost importance. So they're looking for that guidance. They want that. They don't want to be going rogue, so to speak. That it's not like they're wanting to be independent operators. They want to be in concert and sync with others across the sector, and that really did come through. So thank you very much, Liz, for sharing your take on that. So I wanted to come to a question next around from Chiyuki. Let me just find the list. Sorry, just bear with me because the list of questions is quite long. Yes, so is this a question I'd like to put to Madigan, if that's okay? So Chiyuki asks, says the presenter mentioned the risks associated with the rapid rise of AI agents in humanitarian work. So Chiyuki's question is, what types of AI agents and focusing areas are typically used? Do we have any data, and what are the challenges?
Yeah, so we don't have any concrete, so basically when we asked this question in the survey, 29.8%, I believe, said that they were using AI agents in some sort of work. In terms of how that breakdown, in terms of what that AI agent is doing, whether that might be predictive or anticipatory agents or communication agents or logistic agents, we don't have quite that data from the survey, so I would love if anyone in this audience would follow and do some follow-up research there. What we are also seeing is that there's these AI-generated persona agents. So, for example, the UNU CPR had this research initiative where it was examining agent-generated digital personas that could kind of stimulate conversations with refugees and conflict actors to see how humanitarian organizations could collect in data, train staff, or understand kind of community needs. But this is also, it was, there was a lot of kind of controversial takes on it because they were also saying, well, you're not actually talking to the refugees or to these conflict actors. It's this persona. Maybe you're missing some of these nuances. And I think that kind of comes into some of the key challenges that we're seeing with AI agents is in terms of these agents are usually built using commercial LLMs. And so within that, you can see like there's a lot of algorithmic bias or inequity. You have questions that kind of come up around the data sovereignty and privacy, and especially when you give these AI agents access to your entire computer, right? You might be working with a sensitive population, and now it has access to that information and can pull it in and kind of do with it what you will. So there's all these sort of questions around ethics and data constraints. And so I think in the humanitarian sector, I think there's definitely room for AI agents in this space. But what we really need to make sure is again, coming back to that sort of governance and training is, how we're helping colleagues actually shape these AI agents to work with in their work and not just come in and kind of, make the decisions or, kind of have everything be true there. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your full question, but again, I think that there's still a lot that we don't know. And I think there's a lot of follow-up research to be done specifically around AI agents in the field of humanitarian AI.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Madigan. Just to add in a few thoughts from my side. So it was quite interesting because when we did the baseline survey in April, no, sorry, I keep saying April, it's May, June 2025, AI agents wasn't even mentioned once. We had chatbots in the open comments. We didn't ask for specific tools as a multiple choice question in the 2025 survey. We extracted that from the open comments. This time we added it as a specific multiple choice question, and we worded it as, we added custom agents in. We worded it as custom built agents, such as built on Microsoft Copilot Studio, OpenAI API. So that was what the 29.8% ticked. And we were surprised at that, because if I say from last year, less than 12 months ago, no mention of this word, through till almost 30% saying yes, they're using it. So we think this is a particular area of interest that we want to delve into further, whether they are just agents accessing SharePoint, whether they're sending emails out to people, or whether they have access to something further, we don't know. So that's something that we'd like to explore further as and when we get to further stages of research. So thank you very much, Madigan, for sharing your thoughts on that. So I've got a question that I would like to, sorry, just bear with me while I go through the list of questions. I would like to put to Najid. So it's from Levent, and they say that Gannett still has a long way to go to reach the level of assistance provided by tools like Claude AI, especially as competitors have rapidly evolved through deep integration with other software ecosystems. In your opinion, can Gannett ever truly meet the high standard of AI assistance our sector requires? Or do you think organizations will eventually open their doors to other trusted AI frameworks as they refine their internal policies? So what do you think about that, Najid? What's your take?
Thanks, Kamal, and thanks, Levan, for the question. I think that's a really fair question, and let me just start saying that there is a misconception. Gannett wasn't built to compete with Claude, GPT, or any other general purpose AI. Those are, of course, impressive tools. They are kind of growing so fast and advancing so fast. That's exactly how the survey shows the results. Humanitarians are already using them and a lot, and we welcome that, of course. But I think the key difference is that Gannett is what it's called, and sorry to be a bit technical here, it's a rack system. So it's a purpose-built system that sits on top of a foundational model that in this case is Claude. So basically, Gannett benefits from all the progresses or advances that Claude does. And the difference is that Gannett, all the information, or let's say the responses that you get in Gannett, are coming from a trusted knowledge base. So we get some sources, we fetch them. Today, more than 1,000 documents are coming from Relief Web, UN agencies, local sources to build that knowledge base. So the difference is that you will get priority in terms of humanitarian focus while using Gannett. So I think the answer isn't Gannett or Claude, is both in this case. And I think it's more about how organizations start looking at testing, finding the right tools for their task. We are not thinking about one kind of tool fits all, but rather as DFS, we are also providing this consultancy where we are kind of working, for example, with Goal and with Liz on understanding what are kind of the needs that they have. We know there are other also organizations kind of doing similar tools in the sector. The idea is to avoid duplication of efforts and rather kind of find the ways to integrate, to kind of build together and co-create those tools. So, but yeah, thanks, Levan, for the question. But I think in this case, we are benefiting for that. Just having said that, we don't know what will happen 6 months, 1 year, 2 years from now with the speed of the AI progress. And maybe Claude is not let's say, the benchmark, but it's other stuff. So just quick note, I think it's also an invitation for everyone to start kind of testing, ideating, and kind of building tools, because today I think the democratization of access or kind of how you can build tools is also kind of open to anyone in that field. So and you can partner with people that are in the sector, in the space, and can guide you in the process. But it's just kind of, again, kind of think big and start small, but keep kind of building and testing. And I think that's a way to go. Thanks.
Thank you, Najid. Madigan, would you like to add any thoughts there about whether Gannett could be a humanitarian Claude?
I mean, I think in some ways it's its own specific purpose, right? So again, what we know with some of the large language models is that it hallucinates, right? It will, and I think someone and one of the comments or questions said, what happens, when you have an LLM or an AI tool that, kind of pleases you, when it answers what you want to hear, right? And I think that's one of the differences with Gannett is that if it doesn't have the answer, it tells you that it doesn't have the answer. It's not going to make up information just for the sake of making up information to give you that answer, right? And I think that's something that really kind of sets it apart. I think the other thing that sets it apart is for anybody that's interested in quantitative data is that we pull directly from the Humanitarian Data Exchange from OCHA. And so those quantitative data sets, we've now integrated them into Gannett, where you can actually, for me as a non-quantitative number data person, I'm now actually able to go in and just ask questions and be able to get those queries and those answers and in my daily language that I use. And so I think those two things kind of set Gannett apart from the Claude. And again, I think for me, the most important part is that sourcing, that we let people see exactly where that information is coming through in-text citations and visibility in our data explorer. So yeah, I think, like Najid said, I don't think it can't compete with Claude, but I think it works for the sector in its own way.
Exactly. It's that contextualization is key, isn't it? So thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that. Next, I'd like to come to a question from Amalia that I'd like to put to Rebecca. Amalia says, particularly for conflict-affected regions, the dearth of local data and documented perspectives will likely affect the relevance and accuracy of AI findings. There's also the matter of privacy and security, with real and potentially immediate implications for local populations. How are organizations dealing with these challenges? So, Rebecca, I know that you have a background in data and that you're working directly with communities. So I wondered if you'd like to share your perspective on that, please.
Yes. So like I mentioned, I'll give an example of our workflow. We do have an AI assisted mapping, but it doesn't mean that the AI is actually, we just generate that data and that's how it ends. So what happens is that even, let's say there's a disaster and we are using AI to generate that data, there's what we call human validation. So before that data set is actually used for humanitarian response, it's validated by a human. So someone goes in, generates the data, and then validates before that data is used or uploaded in the platform that we call OSM. So about data ethics and protections, we do have a policy of which we follow, and we usually the platform that we use, we don't just upload data that is very sensitive. An example I would give is for Sudan, is it? Yeah. So there's mapping that we had to stop because people are using that data for attacking the people. So again, we do have our an ethics and data protection that we follow, and some of that data we can create it and make it private. So it depends on the situation. And then the AI that we create is actually verified by humans. Yeah, thank you. I hope I answered you.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I wondered, Timmy, what might you want to jump in and share any thoughts?
Well, I think she summed it up. I just want to say that apparently conflict regions and those kind of peculiar places are most affected by, such AI findings because, context around data quality, infrastructure, and even the availability of real world context as to the issues. And that also pushes the envelope around the need for, small language models that cater to particular local context in that way. So I think that's just my part to it.
Thank you. Liz, I could see you nodding along there. So I wondered if you wanted to share some thoughts too.
I don't know. It just a couple of points that just resonated with me, both in terms of what Rebecca was talking about, introducing, some of those safeguards, like putting a human in the loop at certain at certain points within the process of developing these tools. I think that's related to the larger conversation about governance and the standards that we need to have, making sure that, that humanitarian practitioners understand what are the specific points within, an AI solution that you need to have that human verification and make sure that you have those checks and balances built into the system. I think, if we are able to integrate something like that into the wider governance conversation, I think that would give us a lot more comfort in deploying different AI tools at the ground level to make sure that that we can have that trust, that, that we have some checks and balances built into the system, but so can the communities that are benefiting, from the services that we're providing. They know that we're not just disappearing and letting the AI do the job for us, that we still have our expertise that we're offering and that we're using to, to validate and ultimately to amplify the impact that we're trying to have, and not to replace it.
Thank you, Liz. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you. So I've got a question from Paul Currian, and it's around the research itself. So I'll take some of it, and I'll also invite Lucy and Madigan in as well. So Paul asks, how do the research figures compare with other sectors, e.g. public and private sector, there's a danger of humanitarian exceptionalism driving policy decisions if adoption in humanitarian organisations is roughly similar in scale and nature to other types of organisations. We're all just surfing the wave, and it might not be specific weaknesses in the sector which are to blame for the lack of more systematic approaches. And Paul, thanks for the question. It is a really good question. Personally, I sort of frame it in the inverse way, that the adoption by individuals is happening despite organizational support, and that individual adoption is being driven by need, by pressure, operational demands, as all the support mechanisms of broader teams, funding fall away, decommissioned systems, that it's something that people are driven to do, to be able to use to support their work and continue business as usual insofar as possible in what we can call fairly chaotic environment and context of 2025 through to 2026. So it's not about apportioning any kind of guilt or blame at individual practices. And personally, I would say that when I'm looking at our findings compared to other sectors, we are, when I'm looking at reports, say from MIT or McKinsey, looking at broader sectors across commercial, also healthcare as well, we're kind of following the same trajectory, but just not as far along. But again, I don't see that as a specific weakness or as a result of saying that we have to catch up to those sectors. In fact, from my personal perspective, I see that as a positive because of those governance gaps, that risk that we've highlighted and that the panel has discussed as well, that this provides an opportunity, a precipice, this critical window for us collectively to grapple with this, share resources and capacity insofar as possible, and drive collective action to bring in specific humanitarian interventions to ensure contextualized, responsible, and ethical AI insofar as possible. And I know that's can feel quite idealistic, but I hope that through things like the research, through convening and bringing together diverse actors, that we can start to make some progress in this space. So I think it's not about humanitarian exceptionalism in putting a halo over us, but as this is circumstances and the patterns have emerged in response to that. So that's just my personal take. I don't know if Lucy and Madigan, you want to come in and share any additional thoughts.
I think you covered it really well, and I think for me, every sector is in a different journey with AI. It was a really disruptive technology when it emerged. When I say it, I'm talking more about generative AI. AI has been around for decades, but the most disruptive part has been with generative AI. So your ChatGPTs, your Claudes, etc. And I'm kind of viewing very similar. We didn't look at this specifically with this survey, with this body of work that we've been doing over the last year. But the parallels that I've been drawing on are what we've seen in other disruptive technologies. So, for example, mobile phones, social media, even the internet. Everyone went on a different journey with that. And I think, again, the humanitarian sector, we weren't necessarily behind. I think we are naturally more cautious because the risks are higher. We're working with the most vulnerable populations on the planet. So we actually absolutely have to be more cautious whenever there's a disruption to our work. So whilst we didn't look at that exclusively, those are the parallels that I've been drawing on, and that's kind of the arc that those are the arcs that I've been referencing through my kind of thinking and to really understand where we're at as a sector. I hope that made some sort of sense.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Madigan, is there anything you want to add?
No, I think both of you have pretty much encapsulated it perfectly. Again, I think we do have to be cautious when we think about how we integrate AI into our work, but I think we also need to recognize it for what it is as well, and also realize that AI is probably here to stay in some capacity or another. We might not know exactly what shape or form it might take. I think that comes down to it, a lot of the different contexts and organizations and situations that you yourself as a humanitarian might find in. But again, I think what we've seen is there's been a lot of practitioner driven, a lot of individual usage, and in that way, shape, and form, I think we aren't as behind. And again, the tech industry is constantly making all of these new advances, but so are the humanitarians as well. We are starting to do more forecasting, more risk analysis, and including those into our programs and into needs assessments. So I think like you said, Kaman, I think I'm maybe as idealistic or hopeful, but I think, there's some positivity coming from this as well.
Thank you, Madigan. We have to be hopeful, I think. We have to hold on to that hope, because it's not just about technology, is it? It's about the whole systemic change, and that we're all invested in this, and how we can build more resilient, robust, and equitable humanitarian system. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the panel discussion and the audience Q&A. So many rich threads and conversation emerging from that. And thank you to our audience for asking such fantastic, challenging questions too. But we're really grateful for that. And we're really glad that you could be really candid with us too. So just in the closing moments, I just wanted to invite you beyond this session to reflect on what you as an individual, or maybe even your organization, can do to support your AI journey. Possibly a light, gentle invitation to set a follow-up action for yourself, whether that is some learning, a conversation, putting on the agenda for a next team meeting, just something light touch or something longer term. I'd really encourage you to do that if that's what you'd like to do. And then in terms of continuing the conversation, we have a couple of online sessions coming up at HMPW, so that's Humanitarian Networks and Partnerships Weeks. These two are taking place online, and we also have some other sessions that are hybrid, Geneva and online. But these two are the AI related ones. So Lucy and I will be convening a session on Tuesday together with some local leaders to gain perspectives on bridging digital divides. So please do join us for that if you're available, and I'll share the link in the follow-up email. And we're also running a broader humanitarian learning and development session together with the Training Providers Forum. And Madigan and Data Friendly Space colleagues will be leading sessions too, online and in person. Madigan, would you like to say a couple of words about that?
Yeah, so the first session is, again, kind of what you've already heard about, is our tool around Gannett. And so we're going to be focusing on AI-powered quantitative analysis here, specifically the data that's coming from the Humanitarian Data Exchange from OCHA. So if you're working anywhere near program data, needs analysis, or response planning, I think it's well worth your time. And then the second one is, I think, something that kind of speaks to that heart of today's findings. It's about building that human in the loop process. So we're going to be joined by Kobo Toolbox, and we're going to be looking at the primary data collection all the way through secondary data analysis. And so I think that human in the loop component is something that the sector really needs to hold on to quite deliberately right now. So yeah, thank you all so much for today.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for joining us today. In the closing minute, just to say that when the session closes, a short survey with 5 quick questions will pop up. If you could give us some feedback about what you liked and what we could improve, we'd really appreciate that. So this session will be uploaded to the HLA YouTube channel and will be available within 24 hours. And we'll send that by email to you together with the slide deck, as well as the transcripts of the full session, so that you can read that at your leisure. As I've mentioned, the executive summary and dashboard will be available in the coming weeks. And as session attendees and survey respondents, you'll be among the first to receive that. So keep an eye out for on our channels for that. And then finally, in recognition of your attendance and participation in this forum today, we'll be sending you an HPass digital badge. So you'll be able to share that on LinkedIn and show that you're engaging in critical AI dialogue in the humanitarian space. So all that's left for me to say is a huge thank you to our wonderful panelists, research team, and of course, our wonderful community for joining us for today's session. Thank you very much.